There are many wretched diseases in this world, but few more so than cannabis disease. As a genetic disease, it preys exclusively on children, causing death at a very young age. For a long time, little was known about this disease, and there is still no cure. But in 1993, a breakthrough occurred. The gene sequence causing cannabis disease was isolated, and tests to detect carriers and sufferers were born. The Greenberg family, in particular, played a key role in this discovery. Having lost their children to cannabis disease, they sought out a doctor to research a cure. They assisted him by providing tissue samples from their own family, while also working with a not-for-profit to provide financial resources, as well as to assist in locating other sufferers of the cannabis disease to provide further tissue samples. It was their understanding that the results of any research would be accessible, affordable, and remain freely available in the public domain to assist in further research. Unbeknownst to the Greenberg family, however, the doctor they were working with applied to patent the gene sequence, and upon receiving the patent, he began charging for testing. No more was this testing freely available to the public. Needless to say, the Greenbergs went to court to stop this. Amongst other things, but most importantly, the Greenbergs argued that the doctor had committed the act of conversion. Essentially, conversion occurs where someone destroys your property or uses it in a way contrary to your consent. That is to say, the Greenbergs argued that their tissue had been given for one purpose, but used for another, for which they hadn't consented. Unfortunately for the Greenbergs, the court categorically rejected this argument. This outcome was reached because the common law holds a presumption that the human body cannot be property. Now, when I say property, I'm not talking about the my home is my castle kind of property. In law, property is much more than houses, land, and objects. It is a fluid concept that governs what you can and cannot do with an object. As a result, it is often referred to as a bundle of rights, referencing the rights you hold in an object, as opposed to the object itself. Some key examples of property rights that you can hold in something are the right to destroy it, the right to sell it, the right to use it as you see fit, the right to stop others from using it, the right to exclude, and the right to give that property away. If you don't have any of these rights in an object, the law cannot assist you in enforcing them. So what this means is that you have no greater right to stop someone from using your tissue than you do to stop the person next to you from sitting in their seat. This is a problem. And it is a problem because if you go to see a doctor for even a routine blood test, there is nothing to stop whoever ends up with that tissue from doing whatever they want with it. Worse still, you can be tricked into giving your tissue to someone and you still cannot stop them from using it as they see fit. Now, the simple solution to this would be to declare our bodies property and that we own our own by birthright. Such a solution would have the benefit of giving you access to the full range of legal solutions available before the law, but it would also have a side effect. It would let you sell your organs and parts of your body, and the risks and dangers of exploitation of the human body are simply too great to justify such a solution. Given the price of organs and tissue today, the chance and risks of exploitation of the poor are simply too great. We do not want people selling their organs to pay for medical bills, home loans, or overdue electricity bills. The risks and consequences that this would have on someone, particularly where they didn't have a choice in the matter, would be dire. We do not need to open an organ market and turn the body into a commodity to solve this problem. So while I do not think that you should be able to sell your organs or any part of your body, I do believe the law can and should stop the Greenberg situation from occurring again. Indeed, it's imperative to ongoing public confidence in the medical profession that this problem be fixed. So to begin, we first need to draw a distinction between tissue that can regenerate itself in the body on the one hand, and tissue that cannot regenerate itself. So examples of non-regenerative tissue are things such as limbs, organs, and generally any part of the body that, if removed, cannot recreate itself. Regenerative tissue are things such as skin cells, blood, sperm, or eggs. If these things are removed from the body, they will grow back. This distinction is important because the potential for exploitation in regenerative tissue is much less than it is in non-regenerative tissue. After all, the consequences of giving blood are dramatically different to giving a kidney. So if we reduce the kind of tissue in which we give property rights, and we reduce the property rights that we give in that tissue, we can solve the Greenberg situation and sidestep the issues of exploitation. If we grant only the rights to use and exclude in our regenerative tissue, the problem can be solved. Now, this no property rule has existed in all common law countries for a long time, and exists in Australia from 1908, when the High Court said that the human body, or part thereof, cannot be property unless work and skill has been applied to it. Unfortunately, the High Court didn't give an example of what work and skill is for modern-day medical science, but current examples include the isolation of a gene sequence, such as that in Greenberg, or the preservation of sperm for IVF purposes. So what this means for you is that your tissue isn't yours and simply doesn't exist in the eyes of the law unless you've applied work and skill to it. The law is completely blind to your physical body as it is now. But given how old and rigid this rule is, it's worked well for a very long time. But given advances in medical science, its cracks have begun to show. One of the more perverse consequences of this rule is that if someone takes your tissue, even by deception, and applies work and skill to it, they now own your tissue. And there is nothing you can do to stop that person from using that tissue or the results of that use as they see fit. This happened to one John Moore in 1976. His doctors had recently diagnosed him with hairy cell leukemia, and they told him that it was critical to his treatment that his spleen be removed. But the doctors also knew that the tissue contained in his spleen was of high commercial value. So they made arrangements to keep large portions of it once it was removed. Knowing also that they needed much more of his tissue to make anything of real commercial value, they tricked him into coming in for medical testing for a decade to provide them with additional tissue samples under the guise that it was critical to his ongoing health and well-being that he do so. He eventually found out about this, and that the doctors had made a cell line from his tissue, patented it, and become quite wealthy as a result. Quite outraged by this, he sued them in conversion in the courts. But he too was defeated by the no property rule. So after 10 years of deception and exploitation by these doctors, the law would not assist him. But now, in the doctor's defense, in the Greenberg and the Moore situation, despite the fact that these medical professionals acted unethically, the results were still of use to society and indeed quite beneficial. But the rule works both ways. There is nothing to stop a doctor from taking your tissue by deception and creating new strands of disease instead of cures. I personally find it inconceivable that the law would not assist you, even in those circumstances, to stop the researcher from using your tissue. This alone should be enough to warrant reform in this area. So as I mentioned earlier, the solution is to grant limited rights, the rights of use, and the right of exclusion in your regenerative tissue only. The right to use will allow you to use your tissue as you see fit, or to consent to others to use it. The brilliant part about this right is that it cannot lead to commodification of the body. all you can do with the right to use is use your tissue yourself or let others use it. You cannot charge financial payment for its use. Such a thing would be no more legal under my framework than it is now, and trust me, it's not legal. And on the other side of the coin, the right to exclude would allow you to stop others from using your tissue where you haven't consented to that use. It's often argued that this could create barriers for medical research. After all, it's much harder for a doctor to do whatever they want with your tissue if you have rights in it. But it's harder to imagine a bigger barrier to medical research than people being too afraid to donate their tissue due to a lack of public confidence in the medical profession due to unethical research practices. If there are no donors, there is no medical research. So provided doctors stay within the purpose for which you give them their tissue, they will never have a problem. And indeed, such limited property frameworks have existed as far back as Roman times. The concept of the usufruct was one such system. This was used where multiple properties had access to only the one water supply. If someone had the right to sell that water supply or the right to destroy it, it could have disastrous consequences on that community. So what usufructory rights did is they granted the users of that water the rights of use and enjoyment in that thing, and stopped short of granting the rights to destroy or sell it. The Romans realized that the granting of such rights could have disastrous effects on these communities, so their solution was to simply not grant them. Now, this system is still used in many countries around the world today and informs the practicality of a limited property framework in a complicated area of law such as this. So, how do I know that this can work? Well, for starters, the United Kingdom has recently begun venturing down this road in a far more expansive way than I am proposing here. The Court of Appeal of England and Wales, the second highest court in the United Kingdom, recently rejected the no property rule outright, stating that it was no longer an adequate principle for this area of law going forward. In reaching this conclusion, the judges looked at the situation of someone losing a limb on a work site and needing it reattached. Impossible 100 years ago, but now easy enough. Their honors realized that if the doctor who was reattaching it destroyed that limb or damaged it beyond repair, there was no way the person from whom that limb had come could sue the doctor to recover any kind of damages. In the eyes of the law, once detached from his body, his arm didn't exist. Therefore, the law could not help him. Stranger still, there is nothing to stop that doctor from just taking that detached arm, putting it in a jar by his bed and keeping it as a trophy. Because the law doesn't see it, the law cannot help you get it back. It was the possibility of ridiculous outcomes like this that made the judges in the UK reject this principle. Unfortunately, the judges didn't say what they were founding this area of law on going forward, but what this does demonstrate is that the no property rule's time is done. So in the UK, medical research is still continuing. People haven't become property, nor have they become a commodity. If my limited property framework is adopted, all that will happen is the law will be brought in line with modern day society, medical advances, and reality. It would have allowed the Greenbergs to say to the doctor, the hospitals, and the world that the benefits of their tissue were for all, not just for some. But most importantly, given the possibility that the cells of someone alive today could hold the cure for cancer, it would let them do the same. Thank you.